Welcome. In this lecture, we're going to access the online subsystem through our code and print the subsystem name to our screen so that way we can see which subsystem we're connecting to. So our first step is to access the online subsystem in our code. Now, as I mentioned before, we're going to create a class to handle all of our session-related code, but until we get our feet wet learning how those functions work, we're just going to add some code to our character class. The template created a menu system character class, so let's go ahead and open up the .h and .cpp files for this class. So I'm here in menu system character.h. Now I'd like to scroll all the way to the bottom and create just another public section here so our session-related code will all be down at the bottom and we won't confuse it with any of the other code. So let's add a public section, and down here is where I'd like to have all variables and functions related to our online sessions. Now let's go into menu system character.cpp, and here's the constructor. Let's go down to the bottom of the constructor and make some room for ourselves here. Here is where I'd like to access the online subsystem. Now the online subsystem class itself has the type iOnlineSubsystem. I'm going to make a pointer to this class and call this online subsystem. Now we see that iOnlineSubsystem is undefined, so we'll need to include the header file where this is defined. Now here's the documentation for the iOnlineSubsystem class, and down here we see the include for this is simply onlinesubsystem.h. So let's copy that, and back here in the character class, we'll paste that include up here at the top. So now IntelliSense should catch up. There it is, and iOnlineSubsystem is now defined. So we have a pointer of type iOnlineSubsystem pointer, but it's just an uninitialized pointer at this point. We need to actually access the iOnlineSubsystem, and we can do that with iOnlineSubsystem, and the static function to get it is called get, and we can hover over this function to see that it returns an iOnlineSubsystem pointer. So now that we have this, we can first check to see if it's valid with if online subsystem. And if we make it to the inside of this if check, our online subsystem is valid. Now from the online subsystem, we can access the session interface. We can do that using our online subsystem pointer to access the function getSessionInterface. Now this function returns an iOnlineSession pointer, and I'd like to store this in a variable. So let's go back to menu system character.h, and I'm going to add a comment that says pointer to the online session interface. And this will have the type iOnlineSessionPTR. Now this is a wrapper to a particular type of smart pointer, and we can't forward declare it. We can see its type by hovering over it. It'll say typedef tshared pointer, and this smart pointer is designed to point to an iOnlineSession object, and it's marked to be thread safe. So this smart pointer is going to hold our session interface for us. So I'm going to call this pointer online session interface. This is how we will access all of the session interface related functions. So I'd like to store our session interface in this pointer, and we can do that here using getSessionInterface. So this function will return the session interface, and we're going to store it in our pointer called onlineSessionInterface. So let's go ahead and do that. Now I'm going to go ahead and Control-Shift-B to compile and see if we get any errors. Now we get some errors because onlineSessionInterface is an unknown override specifier. Now, normally what we do when we make a pointer variable is we forward declare, but we can't do that with this iOnlineSession pointer. iOnlineSession pointer is a typedef. That means it's sort of an alias for this type that it shows when I hover over it. It's a tshared pointer to an iOnlineSession with this additional option, ESP mode thread safe. Now, when a variable is thread safe, that means it has particular qualities designed to make it safe for multi-threaded code. Now, we don't need to get into multi-threaded code for this course, but when a program uses multiple threads, we have parallel lines of execution going on simultaneously, which means our variables have to behave in a way that we don't get any unintended behavior with these multiple threads going on. Now, because iOnlineSessionPointer is simply a t-shared pointer with that thread safe option, we could do one of two things here. We can include the header file here in menusystemcharacter.h for the iOnlineSession, or we could simply use the t-shared pointer smart pointer wrapper. We could say t-shared ptr, and we could forward declare iOnlineSession and use that second optional parameter espmode thread safe. And we could use this type for our variable online session interface. So this typedef iOnlineSessionPointer is simply an alias for this type, a t-shared pointer designed to hold an iOnlineSession with the thread safe option. So we can remove this line here and simply have our pointer using a t-shared pointer to the class iOnlineSession marked as thread safe, and we're forward declaring iOnlineSession here. Now this allows us to avoid having the header included for iOnlineSession here in our header file, but as soon as we use this type in menusystemcharacter.cpp, we'll need the include there. So here's the documentation for iOnlineSession, and here is the include. It's in interfaces/onlinesessioninterface.h. So we'll copy that, and we'll paste the include up here at the top of menusystemcharacter.cpp. And now here in the character constructor, we have the online session interface. Now we'd like to verify that we've found the online subsystem and see what subsystem we're working with, so we can do that by printing text to the screen. Now we can always get some text printed to the screen using an on-screen debug message. An add on-screen debug message function exists on the engine. We can check to see if gEngine is valid and use the gEngine, which is of type uEngine, to call add on-screen debug message. Now I'm going to use -1 for the key. That's so we don't replace the previous message if we're printing more than one on-screen message. I'll go ahead and use 15.f so we print this message for 15 seconds. Now the next parameter is an f color. I'm just going to use blue. And next we need our string. I'm going to use fstring printf so I can format a string. The first argument is going to be the string itself, and I'm going to say found subsystem with a format specifier so that I can format this string with another string. And the other string is going to be the name of the subsystem, which we can get through our online subsystem pointer. So I'm going to use the online subsystem pointer and use the function getSubsystemName. Now getSubsystemName returns an f name, but we're going to convert it to an f string using toString. And that way from the f string, we can get a C style string using the asterisk at the beginning here. So this entire quantity returns an f string, but we're converting it to a C style string since we're using printf to format this. Now, if you're not familiar with formatting strings with printf, I go over this in my Unreal Engine Shooter course, so check that out for more information. But all you need to understand is that we can use printf to format a string using another string, so we're going to print out the name of our subsystem here. And now, once we run the game in the constructor, we should have access to the online session interface, and we should also be able to print the name of the online subsystem that we're connecting to. And we're expecting Steam, but we'll see what we get. Let's compile this. Now, attempting to launch the editor, I get an unable to delete hot reload file, and this is a DLL. So if you get this kind of message, you just need to clean up your binaries and generate your project files again. So you need to close Visual Studio and also close the Unreal Engine editor. And go ahead and delete the binaries, intermediate, and saved, and generate Visual Studio project files again. Then I can open the U project and rebuild the modules. Now, after opening Visual Studio again, I can go ahead and attempt to compile, and now I've compiled successfully. Now, in order to connect to the Steam online subsystem, you have to have a Steam account. Now, it doesn't cost anything to create a Steam account. If you already have one, make sure you have the desktop app running and you're signed in. If you don't have one, then you'll need to create an account and install the Steam app. Now, once you have the Steam app running and you're logged in, then you can run an Unreal Engine game and connect to Steam. So now I'm back in the editor, and I see found subsystem null. See, as soon as the editor started up, we get our constructor called for the character as it exists in the world here. So there's something going on here. We've connected to an online subsystem called null. Now, this doesn't mean null pointer. Unreal Engine actually has an online subsystem called null, and it's designed for LAN connections, so you can test the online subsystem functionality via LAN. So the question is, why don't we connect to the Steam online subsystem? So here's a little challenge for you. First, test the game in the PIE, or play in editor. Then, change net modes to use a dedicated and a listen server. See what debug message we get. And finally, package the game and test the game in a packaged build. See if we've connected to Steam in that case. And finally, let's see if we can figure out what's going on. Go ahead and pause the video and give this a try. Okay, so we've seen that if we just play in the editor, we see that we found subsystem null. I can change the net mode here to play as a listen server and hit play, and I still see null. And finally, if I change the net mode to play as client and hit play, then we still see found subsystem null. So we're not connecting to Steam. Now the next thing to try is to package the build. So I'm going to go to Platforms, Windows, and Package Project. Here's my project folder. I'm going to make a new folder called Build, and in the Build folder, we'll create our packaged project. So I'm going to select this folder. Okay, now that packaging is complete, I'm going to go back to my project folder and open the Build folder. Here inside Windows, I have my executable. I'm going to go ahead and launch this. And now I can see at the top left, it says Found Subsystem Steam. So we're actually connected, and you can see at the bottom right, there's a Steam pop-up notifying me that I've connected with Steam. So we see that we can't connect with Steam from the play-in editor, but in a packaged project, we're able to connect. So that's how we can verify that we're actually using Steam, and we found the Steam online subsystem. So in the next video, we'll get that session interface that we stored in a pointer and actually use it. And we'll call the create session function to create our first game session. And then we can verify that we have a new session using on-screen debug messages. So in summary, we created a new project and configured it to use Steam as its online subsystem. We also accessed the online subsystem from within the character class, and we even created a pointer to the online session interface. We'll be using this pointer in the next lecture. I'll see you soon.